Hi everyone, and thank you for tuning in this evening. I'm Dakota Smith.
And I'm Meredith Fish. We have a jam-packed show tonight, Dakota.
Yes, we sure do. Tonight, we'll be joined by the Weather Communications class speaking about the future of the weather enterprise.
Yes, plus we'll have another report from our weather risk and financial markets class regarding the soybean and natural gas market.
But first, let's get into the latest news and information from the weather enterprise and climate world. Here's this week's update in the air.
Tornado season is officially here. Last week we had the first major tornado threat of the season with tornado watches throughout much of the Mid-South. Climatologically, April is the period where tornado season starts to pick up. Due to the transitional nature of spring, there are greater chances of mixing air masses needed to create conditions conducive to tornado formation. The collision between the warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico and the air originating over the higher terrain of the southwest creates a maximum instability in the atmosphere, making a perfect setup for twisters. March was relatively quiet this year with 25 tornadoes, much below the monthly average of 80 tornadoes. This number is thought to be low due to the bitter cold we have all experienced this winter. We don't know what will happen later in the season, but last year we had a quiet March and April, then in mid-May a flip switched, creating the Moore and El Reno tornadoes.
The World Health Organization, or WHO, has recently named air pollution as the largest environmental health risk that we face. It's estimated that nearly 7 million people die each year due to the exposure of air pollution. Because of our increasing use of fossil fuels, air pollution has never been a greater risk to us. Specifically, particulate matter less than 2.5 micrograms, which can be created by any form of combustion. The director of WHO stated, "The risks from air pollution are now far greater than previously thought or understood, particularly for heart disease and strokes." Worldwide, nearly 41% of deaths due to air pollution occurred in the Western Pacific region, including countries like China, Japan, and Australia. China has recently been the spotlight of air pollution events, as only 3 of 74 Chinese cities fully complied with state pollution standards in 2013. China has vowed to correct their air pollution problem, as Chinese officials have cited air pollution as a top priority. One drastic step China has taken is using drone technology to spy on industries that emit air pollution. Now that WHO has spoken on the matter, hopefully widespread change for air quality improvement will occur.
NASA researchers have discovered a new way to better understand crop productivity. Chlorophyll, which is responsible for greening plants, emits a small fluorescent glow naked to the human eye. Satellites with special monitoring equipment discovered that the U.S. Corn Belt has the most prolific plant growth on the planet, beating the evergreen Amazon. This is especially clear during July, when corn and soybeans are at their peak growing season. Year-round, the most productive region is still the Amazon, but during July, the Midwest is the most productive place on Earth. This information is helpful in determining crop yields, as climate change is making crop forecasting increasingly more important. The recent IPCC report continues to clearly identify the future issue of food security with a warming planet.
Thanks for staying with us here on Up in the Air.
Up next, Josh Markle and Eli Dennis from the Weather Risk and Financial Markets class will bring us the latest on the soybean and natural gas market.
Commodities, markets, and trading, historically and presently, play a major role in economies across the world. Simply put, a commodity is an economic good that is valued and driven by supply and demand. The 4 categories of trading commodities include energy, metals, livestock, and agricultural. For our presentation, we will focus on the energy commodity natural gas and the agricultural commodity soybeans.
Soybean production is dominated by 3 countries, the United States, Brazil, and Argentina. Today we will focus on May futures contracts and the mechanisms driving those prices. This harvest season, Southern Hemisphere fall, is drawing near close as harvest is complete in Brazilian regions such as Mato Grosso and Paraná, and just over 45% complete in Argentina. The effect of weather during harvest is different from its effect during growth. Ideally, drier than average days allow farmers to efficiently harvest their crop, and rain causes delay. Since harvest is nearing completion, the prices are primarily being driven by demand. There's no question China is powering demand rates. The Chinese have an increased demand compared to past years due to their thriving livestock centers. This demand has left U.S. supply at an all-time low. The most recent supply report was delivered in the USDA quarterly crop estimate on April 1st, and it drove a price jump of nearly 50 cents per contract in one day. In the next few weeks, prices will be determined by the actions of China. The May futures contract market will continue its bullish nature if the Chinese continue to deplete U.S. supplies. However, if the contracts are canceled in the U.S. and switch to South American crop, we can expect a bearish trend.
Now let's move on to the commodity natural gas. Natural gas plays a vital part in United States electricity generation, as it is responsible for approximately 22% of electricity generation. We will focus on the June 2014 NMAX natural gas futures contract. This form of commodities trading is referred to as speculative trading, which involves taking large risks in order to make large gains. There are many factors that contribute to the price of natural gas, but in general, it all comes down to the supply and demand. For the most part, weather and the use of other forms of energy drive the supply and demand. Thus, one must consider the use of crude oil, coal, hydro, wind, and solar. Abnormally cold or warm temperatures across widespread areas of the United States will tend to drive prices up as the demand for electricity increases and the supply diminishes. Let's take a look at this past winter's June future contract prices. As you can see, the future prices were in a positive trend for the majority of the winter. This correlates well with the abnormally cold winter the majority of the United States endured. As we enter spring and progress further into injection season, where the supply will increase and the demand will decrease, we can expect a different trend in nat gas prices.
For Up in the Air, this is Eli Dennis
and Josh Markle.
And welcome back. So I spent some time at Relay for Life this weekend, and the warm weather was great. So I hope you got to spend some time outside too.
Yeah, I did. I actually went home for the weekend, which was really nice. I was outside most of the day.
Cool. Well, so I hope this warmer weather sticks around for the next week.
Yeah, I hope so too. And Ryan is joining us now with our next week's climate outlook.
Thanks very much, Meredith and Dakota. You're absolutely right. More of a spring-like pattern than we saw certainly during the month of March, with the cold weather dominating a lot of Pennsylvania. A sign of spring is that there is no longer any snow on the ground here in central PA. 17% of the nation covered in snow, and this is the last time you'll be seeing this graphic here on Up in the Air until November or December, when snow really starts to return to the lower 48. At this time, it's really through the Rockies and the West where we have any appreciable snow cover. In terms of what we dealt with over the past 10 days or so, it's certainly been more of a wet pattern than we saw during the month of March, which was quite dry here in central PA. A couple of rainstorms during last week. You can see here on April 3rd, some rain moved into much of Pennsylvania, and we dealt with an appreciable amount of rain between April 3rd and 4th through a lot of the mid-Atlantic and Pennsylvania itself. But as we went into last weekend, it certainly turned drier, and Sunday was a decent day with a lot of sunshine. But during the later frames here, you can see the beginnings of our storm system that came through on Monday with a good deal of rain for a lot of Pennsylvania, and even caused the Phillies home opener to be delayed until Tuesday. So that's the story last week, but going forward, what can we expect next week? Our temperature outlook for April 14th through the 20th features continued below normal temperatures through much of the eastern seaboard, but in State College at this time of the year, our average high is in the upper 50s to near 60. So I think that many of us can take below normal temperatures compared to what we dealt with back in March and February when it was below normal. Out through the west, this is where we'll find above normal temperatures, kind of the same scheme that we saw through much of the winter. In terms of the precipitation, I do believe that we will average above normal through this period, but it does not appear that we are headed into a very, very wet period, meaning that every day has a chance of showers. Rather, I think that we'll have a couple of days with some decent weather and a couple of days with rain heading into next week. Now, through the west, it's kind of a split decision here. Through the northwest, of course, we've been talking about that mudslide that occurred in Washington, now the result of several inches of rain. It does appear that above normal precipitation will continue to occur through the northwest, while it will be quite the opposite through Arizona and southern parts of California, below normal precipitation into next week. And that is this week's Climate Outlook. Meredith and Dakota, back to you.
Thanks, Ryan. Hopefully we continue to see some glimpses of spring.
And joining us now are Victoria Franca and Stefano Di Pietro from Penn State's Weather Communications class with the Future of the Weather Enterprise.
Thank you for joining us today. My name is Victoria Franca. And my name is Stefano DiPietro.
And today we will be stimulating your minds and talking to you about the enterprise. Not that enterprise, of course. I'm talking about the future of the weather and climate enterprise.
However, the first question we must ask ourselves is, what is the weather and climate enterprise?
The weather and climate enterprise is a unified, interdependent relationship that provides weather and climate information and services in the United States. This includes public, private, and academic sectors.
The next question we must ask ourselves is, where is this enterprise going?
This flowchart is an example of the changes that have been made by the American Meteorological Society to the enterprise over the past few years.
Committees highlighted in yellow denote modifications made to their specific roles, while those highlighted in red represent those new entities that have been added.
One of the more fundamental matters facing the enterprise currently is communication. This is a large part of the decision-making process and is crucial for circulating information throughout the enterprise.
Communicating uncertainties of weather and climate predictions has been a persistent struggle for all sectors and is now a main area for improvement across the board. This map is an excellent example of extreme ambiguity in the forecast of Hurricane Sandy. Each line represents a different model projection of the storm's track. Although this plot is an attempt to communicate uncertainties in the forecast, this can be quite confusing to look at.
A main lesson learned from the difficulties of communicating uncertainties is that communication is essential for weather and climate information circulation. The Weather and Climate Enterprise has made improvements to their forecast by better communicating uncertainties. This makes each forecast more clear, concise, and complete. We must remember that no forecast is complete without a measure of uncertainty. In the aspect of communication, events such as the AMS conference, which is a yearly meeting for the enterprise, is used as a neutral medium for discussion. This allows for a collaborative effort between all sectors intended to circulate information and discuss pressing matters. Pam Emk, a senior staff engineer at Northrop Grumman Aerospace Systems, stated that the CWCE has developed the best way to ensure efficient communication between the sectors and continues to have internal discussions about how frequently to hold these events.
She further states that there is an overlap between all the sectors, and that is where friction between the sectors has occurred. I believe it is in all of our interests for entities like the AMS to continue the dialogue within the enterprise to ensure that each sector can continue to strengthen what it does best and to help resolve conflicts related to overlapping capabilities.
The Weather and Climate Enterprise is no longer restricted to just the United States. A new entity, the Board on Global Strategies, has been created to respond to topics at an international scale. Its purpose is to promote development of advanced meteorological observations and models across the globe. The enterprise is also beginning to expand its horizons and place emphasis on improving water, food, energy, and environmental security in all nations, and the Board on Global Strategies and its subcommittees are a major reason for this.
Now our time is running out here, but let's just sum up a few of the key points to wrap our heads around. Over the past decade or so, the Weather and Climate Enterprise has undergone quite a few modifications. However, despite these modifications, consistent and clear communication amongst the three sectors within the enterprise is still a work in progress. Luckily, over the years, sessions such as the AMS conference have been held to provide a neutral medium in which the enterprise as a whole can discuss issues related to the public, private, and academic partnership, and these sessions continue yearly.
Communicating uncertainties in weather forecasts remains another area of development. Ultimately, all forecasts should bear some uncertainty. If data and forecasts are generated but poorly communicated or understood, the utility and thus the value of the data is decreased. The Weather and Climate Enterprise has more recently taken on a global front in the hopes of developing meteorology across the globe and focusing on more environmental subject matters. Well, that just about wraps it up for the future of the Weather and Climate Enterprise.
From here down on Earth
To up in the air, I'm Victoria Franca.
and I'm Stefano DiPietro. Live long
And prosper.
And that's going to do it for tonight's episode. We hope you enjoyed our content featuring a variety of news from the Weather Enterprise and Climate Science community.
And we hope to see you right back here next week with more content from Penn State students. In the meantime, I'm Meredith Fish.
And I'm Dakota Smith. Join us next time, Up in the Air.